Bring us your poetry from inspiration sought. Come join us with your images, your verses, words, and thought. From here, we'll share your balladry with those who do not know it. This platform here for you to show the world that you're the poet.
Welcome to episode 18 of You're the Poet, the poetry podcast featuring you. I'm host Matt Bergio, and I'm here with co-host Phil Bergio. Phil, welcome.
Matt, okay.
Here at You're the Poet, our purpose is to share our love of poetry with the world and invite you to do the same. I want to start by saying thank you to all of our guests, and especially our listeners who have made You're the Poet possible. We hope you enjoyed the podcast and the poetry that is shared here. Our featured guest for this episode of You're the Poet is Ryan Morgan, who is joining us from Ireland. Ryan, welcome.
Oh, thanks for welcoming me here. Really appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're glad you can join us, and we look forward to your contribution to the episode. To start things off, I'm going to share our classic poem for this episode. When I was doing research for what classic poem I wanted to do, I decided to look up our United States presidents to see if any of them had written any poetry. And I found a few that had, and I was like, well, this is kind of a neat thing. So I was looking through them, and I found one by Abraham Lincoln that I really liked. Abraham Lincoln was our 16th president here. This poem is called My Childhood Home I See Again. And in his own words, from the letter he wrote to his friend, he writes, "The piece of poetry of my own which I alluded to, I was led to write under the following circumstances. In the fall of 1844, thinking I might aid some to carry the state of Indiana for Mr. Clay, I went into the neighborhood in that state in which I was raised, where my mother and only sister were buried, and from which I had been absent about 15 years. That part of the country is, within itself, as unpoetical as any spot on the earth. But still, seeing it and its objects and inhabitants aroused feelings in me, which were certainly poetry, though whether my expression of those feelings is poetry is quite another question. When I got to writing, the change of subjects divided the thing into 4 little divisions or cantos, the first only of which I send you now." So Lincoln makes note that there were 4 cantos or 4 parts, and I'm going to be sharing the first part, Canto 1. The second part was also published by his friend who he sent the letter to. The third one, when he found out that his friend wanted to publish the poem, this is Andrew Johnston, the publisher, he sent him a third part, but Andrew Johnston thought that the third part didn't really fit with the poem, so he didn't publish it. And it was later called The Bear Hunt, and it's kind of out there as a separate poem. And I couldn't find anything on a 4th canto, so I don't know if Lincoln never wrote it or it wasn't shared. But anyway, this is Canto 1 of My Childhood Home I See Again. My childhood's home I see again, and sadden with the view. And still, as memory crowds my brain, there's pleasure in it too. O memory, thou's midway world, twixt earth and paradise, where things decayed and loved ones lost in dreamy shadows rise, and freed from all that's earthly vile, seem hallowed, pure, and bright, like scenes in some enchanted isle and bathed in liquid light. As dusky mountains please the eye when twilight chases day, as bugle notes that passing by in distance dies away, as leaving some grand waterfall, we lingering list its roar, so memory will hallow all we've known but know no more. Near 20 years have passed away since here I bid farewell to woods and fields and scenes of play and playmates loved so well. Where many were, how few remain of old familiar things, but seeing them to mind again, the lost and absent brings. The friends I left that parting day, how changed as time has sped, young childhood grown, strong manhood gray, and half of them are dead. I hear the loved survivors tell how naught from death could save, till every sound appears a knell, and every spot a grave. I range the fields with pensive tread, and pace the hollow rooms, and feel, companion of the dead, I'm living in the tombs. Abraham Lincoln.
Wow. You know, when you think of Lincoln, you think Gettysburg Address. Great piece of literature, but you don't think of him as a poet, you know? He's so tied to the Civil War.
Well, again, I mean, I would have thought of him as a poet, but he's a very good one, isn't he? He was a very, very fine one.
Yes, he was.
When did he write this in terms of his experiences with the Civil War? I mean, was it way before?
Well, he mentions that it's 1844 is when he went back to promote Clay for his political office.
Civil War is 1861 to 64. Something like that,
Yeah, so almost 15, 20 years before the Civil War.
Yeah, I mean, even in this, there seems this sort of restlessness, doesn't there, in within the poem, and it's almost something of a harbinger, you know. That verse, I hear the loved survivors tell how naught from death could save, till every sound appears a knell and every spot a grave, and I range the fields with pensive tread. I mean, it feels almost like it's presaging things a little bit. There's doom on the horizon on this one, you know.
Yeah, like he could be walking those grounds almost like post Civil War.
They said he had
some of the
some
battles.
psychic visions, in his life.
Did he?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Obviously not one that involved avoiding a theatre, but
Truth.
Truth.
His wife did.
oh yes, that's true.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, people talk about how kind of in his nature, the people that knew him throughout his life, he was always seemed kind of melancholy. And they talk about, and this is one of the few writings in this letter where he actually mentions or talks about his mother's death and then the fact that he had a sister that died. And so I think some of those memories of that is what kind of gave him that melancholy appearance throughout life.
Yeah, it's laced all through this. It's laced all through this. Yeah, it's a very bittersweet poem, and I think it's very beautiful.
I agree. If you get a chance, check out the second part and even the bear hunt. They were also well written. Anyway, from here, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to share his poem for the episode.
My poem's called Changing Perspectives. When I was young, I could climb a tree. I could swim a mile and dance with glee. But as years go past and around the sun, I've slowed a bit, but I still have fun. Though different things are done by me, no longer do I climb a tree, but sit beneath its cooling shade to read a book where poems are made, and being at peace I will be. No more hiking mountain trails, but wandering quiet lanes to listen to the birds sing and flash colors in the morning rain. I spend more time alone now, not by choice, but by circumstance. I spend time thinking of the years gone by, of times when I could climb a tree, but grateful that I am still me. Philip Bergio.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Very nice. Sort of like a looking back. I like that. And I will say, I like how it ends that, but grateful that I am still me. I like how that kind of sums it all and brings it all together.
I thought that was so beautiful, Philip, and I love this kind of the thread of the self is going all the way through this. It's just absolutely wonderful. I'm also sort of reminded of that proverb, isn't it? That it's something like true generosity is an old man who plants a tree he'll never sit under. And it's almost as if you were then playing in that tree that somebody else planted. And the thread of it is beautiful, absolutely beautiful, Philip.
Thank you.
All right. From there, we're going to move to my poem for the episode. So these are all sort of having this nostalgic and looking back, reminiscent theme. And my poem sort of follows that as well. This is from my Zor Acres collection. It's entitled The Red Barn. And this is just talking about a barn out here at Zor Acres that has shown the toll of time as it's gone through the years and how it's faded. And it used to be white and then it was painted red and now it's just kind of faded away. And I wanted to capture that in this poem. The Red Barn. It holds a place within my memory, a once white, once red, now faded structure. It lays dormant, empty, scary to see. Once upon a time, in my youth once pure, this old, weather-stricken building saw life, never knowing the where it would endure. It once flourished lively, business was rife, from chickens and tractors and tools galore, children once playing, forgetting their strife. Alas, those days of old are from before the forest filled with locust tree, a shaded wall that blocks the barn of yore. And as it sits for all eternity, it holds a place within my memory. Matthew Bergio.
Remember the times in the barn. Good times. Me and your mom used to play ping pong back there.
Yeah, it's crazy to see or to remember all the changes that it dealt with in the course of time. I remember processing chickens in there or the chickens living in there. There's obviously the tools and stuff in the back part. It's sort of divided into 3 sections. Used to be a dog pen at one time.
Yeah, okay.
Some good memories there. I wanted to talk a little bit about the form of the poem, but I can't remember what this form of poetry was called. So I forgot to look that back up, but it definitely follows a certain form out there.
I absolutely love that poem. And are you two related? Because there seems to be a common theme there. Really.
I'm Matthew's father.
I kind of got that. It's just this sense of place. And again, there's almost like this comfort, but also this melancholy that things are passing slowly, changing slowly, but nevertheless, things are changing with the barn, even as you change. What's a locust tree?
Oh, it's one of the indigenous trees around here. The old farmers used to make posts out of them because they have a really good tolerance to rot. So, locust tree.
Oh, yeah. It almost seemed that they were intruders, almost.
Yeah, kind of thing. I didn't plant them. God planted these trees.
Yeah,
Makes good firewood. They have a really shallow root system, so a good storm will knock them over, which we had a couple of years ago.
yeah.
Lost a lot of them. So
Ah, yeah, yeah. Well, I just thought it was absolutely beautiful, and the gradual fading of the barn, but nevertheless, it's still there.
I was reminiscing on it the other day because this poem was actually written in 2005. So here we are almost 20 years later, and I was looking at the barn even as I walked up here to the studio today, and just to see it, some of those locust trees blown down by the storms,
Yeah.
more locust trees that have popped up. They just sort of keep the locust grove, as we call it, just keeps getting further and further out as the trees take over.
Well, it's so interesting because locusts gives me an idea of a plague.
Ah,
Like this is an unwelcome, almost sort of intrusion and an encroachment on the barn and the agriculture, you know.
if they don't fall over, they're nice trees. Really pretty flower, very fragrant.
Mm.
I mean, it smells like a perfume counter with between our honeysuckle and the locust trees in the spring.
It sounds lovely, guys. It sounds like you live in a very lovely place.
We
love
like it.
Yeah, we definitely like it. Yeah, but you're not wrong. If from the barn's perspective, the locust trees probably are taking over and infringing, and
Mm.
so. All right, from here we want to move to our guest section of the episode. Ryan, you're the poet. Show us what you've got.
Okay, well, I live in Ireland, but I'm originally from Wales, from the South Wales valleys, which are known for mining and for ironworking. This is about that place where I'm from. It's called Origin Story. I am from the black bones of the earth, pressed trees of prehistories, hacked from the marrow deep, brought up into the night to burn. Dust from the amputation, petrifying inspiration. I am from the Ribboren River wrapping the valley floor, the rock where Merlin laid his head to dream, where a martyr's artery gushes gently over submarine shopping trolleys and smelted sulphurous stones. I am from the Roman road, relentless as the geometry of conquest, scored into the hillside with gladius and pylon. I march its creases daily upon the map of memory. I am from the crumbled castle crushed on the cliff top, the vaulted arches in its remaining ward, and the bleak song of the keening, battle-sharpened wind. I am from the once lusty town, the pitted iron giant that beats against its hollowed-out heart with an untempered fury born of unforgotten furnaces and a rusting will. I am from the chain link between decades of beads, comfort of a thorny crown, pressed patellas in a pulping pew, silencing communion cleaving the mouth's trussed roof, crisp Corpus Christi processions, a swivel-eyed display of bleached identity. I am from rock buns and scones baked by walnut-knuckled hands served with almond fingernails. I am from the siren's promise of salt and vinegar, greasily hot in the wet-nosed air of winter. I ring with the Liberty Bell of the microwave ping. I am from a dad ground in the crush between day and night shift, the assembly line of endurance, exhaustion, duty, devotion. I am from the smell of clinging turf on his rugby studs, the muddy sadness at my reluctance to try pitch into his passion. I am from a mam working 2 jobs when she didn't sew or cook or hoover the house or dare to close her eyes in sleep, for in dreaming there is destitution. Her stitching time saved mine. I am from the working class, the aspic solidarity of, who do you think you are? Be bold, but don't brag. Get ahead, yet know your place. Be brilliant, don't outshine. From the kindness of neighbours, the odd bob for sweets from the dwindling top of the electricity meter. I am from the dissonant, sweaty squeak of a slipping, strangled grip wrapped around a rare, resented job. I am from the grind, the graft of others, and the grateful guilt. Ryan Morgan.
Very descriptive.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I like the whole kind of progression of time there as you go from kind of the beginning of history and through the whole series there all the way up until your current life.
What hit me was a reference to the Roman weapons, the gladius and the pilum.
Yeah. My hometown was some of the first settlements there were Roman encampments. The road still is the A470. It's a direct Roman road that goes from Cardiff up to a place called Brecon through my town. So it's dead straight, as the Romans would. They wouldn't stop for anybody.
Nice.
And right around that same area of the poem, I think one of my favorite lines was that I march its creases daily through the map of memory. I kind of felt, even though you're talking about the Roman road there, I felt that sort of summed up this whole poem in a way.
Oh, thank you.
I could picture myself walking through your town the way you were describing things.
Yeah. It's a town that has sort of had its troubles and had its own sort of economic difficulties. I've never been to Flint in Michigan, but I imagine that Flint in Michigan and my town of Merthyr Tydfil might be actually kind of culturally similar, actually, in terms of kind of like big, heavy industry kind of bleeding away and rusting away.
Right. There's a section, they call it the Rust Belt here, where, a lot of the steel mills have gone belly up and things have changed in the auto industry.
Very similar stories.
You got another poem for us?
I do.
Go for it.
This one is called Scrumping. I don't know if that translates for a non-British audience, but scrumping is something that somebody does when they're a kid and they sneak into somebody else's garden or orchard and they just take a couple of apples without permission.
Yeah, they do that here, but it's not called scrumping.
All right, okay. It's where you get the word scrumpy from for cider, if you ever get that idea. I went scrumping a lot as a kid.
You learned a new word.
Yeah, there we go. Excellent. This is cultural crossover here.
Right.
So I went scrumping a lot as a kid because we didn't have iPhones. Here we go. A fox in boy's clothing, tricking without pardon, the locks no bar to his roaming, slinking into the garden. The quarry lies within, pendulous from the dappled tree, a treasure enticing him to sin in unscrupulous apple larceny. Breathless and fleet, a dusky trickster's shadow, restless on his feet, hungry, ambitious, callow. Suddenly stilled at the window, as a noise fills the heart with fright, under the spilled glow of the house's arc of light. Hitched in breath and stride, waiting to be caught. But the punishment doesn't arrive, and he escapes as quick as thought. Under the objects of his desire, he swiftly reaps his harvest. No one will suspect that he acquired these heaps until they are missed. The trees rustle and bluster, but no further alarm is raised. He sneaks out his bundle of plunder in the curve of his arms to graze. When I sank my teeth into the forbidden fruits, my mouth filled with the thrill of thievery. The tart release of stolen juice was embellished with the relish of secrecy. Ryan Morgan.
I love it. Scrumping?
Scrumping.
Scrumping. I wrote that down.
Yeah. Also just plain theft, I suppose.
Yeah, but scrumping sounds more
It feels more permissible.
poetic.
Yes, it's a rapscallion thing to do.
Right. What would they call it here? Because kids here do the same thing, Matt. What would they call it here?
Theft.
Theft.
Breaking and entering.
I will say one of the things I like about the podcast and hearing spoken poetry is I love the way you read that. That sneaking, whispering.
That's good.
That really added to the poem compared if I was just reading it myself in a book.
Oh, it was the most exciting thing you could do as a kid was sneak into somebody else's garden and nick an apple. It's the best thing.
Oh, I love that.
It's the best thing.
I love that line, the thrill of thieving.
At least there wasn't vandalism. You ate the apple after you took it.
Oh yeah. It's all extremely innocent. It's all extreme. I mean, I wasn't in there digging up his cabbages or anything like that. It was nothing. It was nothing extreme. It was nothing extreme.
See, here they do the knucklehead things like driving their trucks through the cornfields and things like that, ruining the crops.
Yeah.
Anyway, from there, I was going to ask if there was anything you'd like to promote poetry-wise, any projects, books, things you got going on in the poetry world?
Well, actually, I have had the good fortune of having two poems published in a very worthy volume called Wheel Song Anthology 5, where all the proceeds go to feed the children. And that's published by Wheel Song Books. And it's available on Amazon or through Wheel Song's own website. And I believe that you two fine fellows as well might have some news on that score also.
Yes, definitely. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Steve Wheeler also contacted us about being a part of the anthology, and both Phil and I have works that are published in the anthology. We'll definitely include links when we put out the podcast where people can get on there and find it on Amazon or on the Wheel Song website as well. That's a great cause, and I think, if anyone out there listening loves poetry, there's some great poetry in there. I know some of the poets, and if you've been listening to the Year of the Poet podcast, I know some of our other guests have been on there. I believe Peter Rivers is in there.
Yeah.
Simon Drake is in there.
When we first started a podcast, I didn't realize how big the poetry community was. And it's kind of neat. I kind of like that. Meet new friends. I like this.
I agree, because when you're writing poetry, it's just a solitary experience. And then to realize that actually you're connected with a bunch of like-minded people is really quite special, isn't it?
Yes.
Definitely. We talked about at the beginning when we were starting this, and we're trying to get guests that, because poetry is such a personal thing, and, a lot of poets are introverts, those that are brave enough to get out there and do the spoken word or to come on a podcast and read their poetry to the world. I think that takes a little step of bravery there. And especially when there's these intimate and these personal topics that some of the guests have been reading about.
Yeah.
Do us another one. Ryan, read another poem for us.
Okay, well, this is another reminiscent one. And this one is called Sweet Youth. I wish I could recover the palate off when I was a little boy, when an orange segment would sing with citrus joy, and too much toothpaste would burn the mouth cold, just as a mist of grapefruit zest would make your lips buzzily jolt, when each sherbet lemon was a yellow jack-in-a-box, whose hard top would open, its melonous crack, then a shock of zinging sweet lightning forking across tongue and tooth, its astringency striking sparks like the drum of a hoof, and a jawbreaker gobstopper was a Pandora's capsule. Over its layers I would slobber as its patina would dapple into a piebald orb, the shell gradually receding until I had drilled to its core, and then I could really sink my teeth in. A simple strawberry was a symphony of taste way back when. Its dimpled, heady aroma an epiphany in praise to a sun-soaked amen. Or the heat of my dad's curry was like a burning ingot, beaten out in a chili-clad smithy and churning on my palate. Everything had greater flavor, sweet and rich with every bite. When did I begin to lose the savor and cease to relish as a child? I wish I could return to back then. I wish I could taste childhood again. Ryan Morgan.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
I like that line, taste childhood again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I like that whole concept of just, you see that all the time if you watch children, anytime they're eating something, that they savor the flavors. And, if it's a new flavor or intense flavor or something they haven't experienced. And I just love that imagery that you can see all this. And I've always loved my dad's chili growing up. And when you're talking about your dad's curry there, that was one of my favorite lines was like the burning ingot beaten out in a chili-clad smithy.
Thank you very much.
That was my favorite line there from the poem.
Yeah, when I make a pot of chili when the boys were smaller, it was a ritual because I put chocolate in my chili and it was like a half a Hershey bar or something. And it's like, who's going to put the chocolate in? And like, me. Okay, it's your turn. So we had a ritual about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're no amateur. If you put the chocolate in, that's a professional chili move.
That's one of my passions is cooking.
Oh, really? Oh, fantastic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's your go-to?
Southern Italian,
Oh, wow.
Sicilian. And then the next one up is Eastern European because my wife was Hungarian Lithuanian. So the boys had two cultures to eat.
Oh, my. What a blessed culinary childhood that must have been.
Living in southwestern Ohio, barbecue, southern food, cornbread, barbecue.
I have never tried cornbread. I've never tried gravy and biscuits or any of that kind of thing.
It's good. There's a thing on YouTube where they have two English kids trying American food they never had before. And they were thinking biscuits and gravy is like a cookie with like a brown gravy. Because no, it's not that.
Uh,
I make a pretty good biscuits and
Yeah,
gravy.
he does.
oh,
He does.
fantastic.
All right, as we wrap things up, we want to let our listeners know that we are grateful that you've taken the time to tune in. We hope you're enjoying the poetry shared here, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with others. Now that the Year the Poet community is expanding at a rapid rate, we have set up a patron site for those who would like to show their support for Year the Poet. You can find us on buymeacoffee.com/yearthepoet. Thank you for your support as we continue to grow. If you've written any poetry and you want to share it here, whether you just have an interest in poetry, consider yourself an amateur poet, or are a professional poet with published works, contact us to be a guest on a future episode. Please check out the website at www.you'rethepoet.com. There's a section there that answers questions about being a guest. Follow us on Facebook for updates and info, and send us an email to host@you'rethepoet.com for feedback or questions about the podcast and how to be our next guest. Until next time, Phil, thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
Ryan, thanks for being our guest.
It's an honor and a real pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye.